We'll be sampling some of your thoughts and comments as we go along. Meanwhile, the Director of Criminal Investigations, George Kinoti, last month told the National Assembly's Committee on National Security that a conman who has been soliciting money from members of Parliament had a special relationship with Murang'a County Representative Sabina Chege. Let's listen in.
Last week in Parliament, Murang'a County Representative Sabina Chege complained that a conman was using her name to solicit cash from MPs and that the police were reluctant to arrest him.
The account was not in my name. They were only lying, but the account was not in my name. I know where the account is. I know the name of the person. I have his ID number. I have his email. I told them this, and they know the person.
The Director of Criminal Investigations, George Kinoti, requested for a private session with members to divulge more about the conman.
We have done quite a number of deep investigations into the matter and have come to a conclusion that there is special relation between the complainants and the suspect.
KTN News established that Kinoti promised MPs he will take charge and ensure the fraudster is arrested immediately. Kinoti says police have in the last week been trying to arrest him in vain since they switched off his mobile phones. Police have so far arrested 70 people who have been defrauding Kenyans, including an M-Pesa attendant in Donholm who registered a fake M-Pesa account using the name of Sabina Chege. The woman who has been sending MPs pictures of her nudes is also on police radar and will be nabbed soon. Kinoti said detectives will raid Committee Maximum Security Prison, which has been converted into a den of fraudsters.
All right, and that is a discussion we're having with our guests here in studio. We have a Member of Parliament, nominated Member of Parliament, Honorable Godfrey Osotsi, who is also an ICT expert and a practitioner, as well as a member of the ICT Committee. We also have Joy Chelagat, a content manager at Standard Digital. And last but not least is Ahmed Mohammed, who is a CEO at Asmali Media, as well as an online influencer. Now, before we get to the nitty-gritties of the Computer and Cybercrimes Bill 2017, this is a report there that has made headlines for the past month. Members of Parliament coming out to say they've had individuals soliciting money from them, individuals sending them indecent, content, so to speak. What does this border, Honorable Osotsi? Is this really cybercrime?
Well, that's cybercrime. If you read through the bill, you realize that cybercrime is those crimes that are committed on the cyberspace. Or the layman language, you can say cybercrime is a crime committed through a computer system which is on a network.
Right.
So, and in the bill, if you read through, a computer system includes even your phone or any physical or virtual gadget that can be used to communicate or send information is categorized in the bill as a computer system.
Right.
So that qualifies as cybercrime. And I want to say it is not just the members of Parliament who are affected. Many Kenyans go through this. We have people who are sending messages, bad pictures, nude pictures to others. We have scenarios where people send threatening messages. You have had cases where someone sends you a message and say, come out of the house or I kill you.
Right.
Then deposit money here and there, or this will happen to you. Those are instances of cyberbullying that the bill is going to take care of.
Right. In the, probably in the history of social media in this country and even globally, a lot of people have been able to hide under anonymity, anonymous accounts, many of them, using fake names on social media. Joy, how can these people be cracked down on? Are they really safe using anonymous accounts?
You see, it's a case of where you kill one thing over here and something crops up. Often they say that you cannot legislate technology extremely. There's a way you can legislate it, but what happens is, I'm sure Mheshimiwa here will tell you the process it has taken to have this bill done.
Right.
By the time we have it done, there are more... there's a lot of many other ways that people are able to do that. So I think what needs to be done, actually, number one, is that we need to ensure that the pathways that people use, for example, if we're having mobile phone operators and we're having service providers, internet service providers, i.e. how do you access your internet? What controls does the government have? Can we be able to track? For example, if we find that there's some anonymous activity, can we be able to track that? We're looking at also which people are we given opportunity to operate in our space. For example, if we let Facebook operate, and there have been countries, by the way, where they've told Facebook, if you don't clean up your act, by the way, we're kicking you out. Right. And there's also countries, like if you look at what's happening in Europe, there's legislation about the amount of rights that users and citizens have over their own cybersecurity. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, but one of the major things that really we need to do to Kenyans is to explain to them how far-reaching the cybersecurity bill is and what they're exchanging when they're accepting to be on certain networks. Right. And I want us to get to that in just a moment. But Ahmed, let's talk about that again as an online influencer. What confidence does this Computer and Cybercrimes Bill 2017 give you?
It gives me a lot of confidence, but also we have some reservations. Kenya is a democratic, there's a lot of democratic space out there. To young people out there, to activists, to vent their anger, if you like, towards something that they think is an injustice. Right. So the question is, how will this bill be regulated? How will it not curtail the freedom and the space, which I think is very important in our country, and not to make it witch hunt, for example. There are some online activists who expose a lot of rot within corporate companies, within the government, who expose corruption in counties, for example, who use their online presence to make Kenya a better place. So we do not want those people targeted under cybercrime bill and so on and so forth. So we need to have a line between encouraging or discouraging troll or cyberbullying and giving us the space to vent our opinions, which we think is healthy for democratic space in this country. Right, and that is a legitimate concern. But let's take a look at some of the punitive measures that the Computer and Cybercrimes Bill 2017 will be introducing, some of the things it will be dealing with. Let's just take a look at that. Even as Honorable Godfrey Osotsi also tries to put it into a bit more context. There we go. So access to internet there. This is data from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics from 2015. We had a 54.8% internet penetration in the country, and that means about 22.3 million internet users in the country, and that is quite a large number. That is half of the population in the country. So here is what the Computer and Cybercrimes Bill 2017 will be cracking down on. Fake news is the first one on that list, and fake news took center stage, especially during the 2017 August electioneering period there. And there's also system hacking, something that Honorable Osotsi has touched on. The country last year lost about 21 billion shillings from cybercrime alone, as well as harassment and stalking, which is what has also been making headlines in the past month or so. But even as we continue taking a look at this, Honorable Osotsi, let's talk about fake news and how the Computer and Cybercrimes Bill will be able to crack down on that.
Well, fake news is a global challenge, not just to Kenya, but all over the world. And this can happen on online platform like social media. It can also happen in a media house like this. So the bill under Section 12 outlaws publishing of false information. Right. In fact, if you have a moment, I can take you quickly through it. Section 12 says a person who intentionally publishes false, misleading, or fictitious data or misinforms with the intent that the data shall be considered or acted upon as authentic with or without any financial gain commits an offense and shall on conviction be liable to a fine not exceeding 5 million shillings or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 2 years or both. Right. What this means is that anything you publish, be it on social media, be it on the computer system, that is false, and you do it intentionally, that is a crime, and it's punishable by a fine or imprisonment. You have had instances where people have been killed online.
Right.
So-and-so is dead. So-and-so has done this. Those things are going to be outlawed by this law once it is enacted into an act of parliament.
Right.
So it is important for those Kenyans who are used to doing those things to know that upon the enactment of this bill into law, it is going to be criminal for anyone to publish information that is false.
All right. I'd like to just go back to Ahmed's concern before we took that Super Bowl, and then have Honorable Osotsi again respond to how this bill will be regulated. What was your concern on this bill?
I mean, Mashimu has spoken about fake news, and it's how you regulate that. Do you want to stifle people talking? And who knows whether it's fake news or not? Who verifies it? It's good to verify as a personal. When I'm tweeting, I'm very, very active on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @asmali77. And I tweet a lot, but most of the things that I tweet is verifiable. I know it has to be. And I agree that before you post, rethink, sit back, and think of the consequences of this. But also, there's a line that maybe someone has hacked into my system and posted a fake news. How, I wanted to ask the Mushimu, how will you know that this is not me and it's someone else who is posting on my behalf? So it's a very thin, it's a very tough line.
All right, good question. Honorable Osotsi.
Well, the bill has its own limitations. It has gone through public participation. The stakeholders have given their views on how they want issues of fundamental rights handled. They have given views on how they want enforcement and administration of the bill to be done. So it is gone through stakeholder engagement, and now it has gone through second reading. There are going to be amendments to this bill, which I can't discuss the amendments here because of the standing orders of Parliament that don't allow me to discuss anything that is just approved by Parliament. But there is going to be fundamental improvement to this bill to take into account issues of management of personal rights like privacy, issues of freedom of speech, freedom of media will be taken into account. But largely what's important is that globally there are 5 benchmarks of handling cybercrime. One is the legal measures. The legal measures, one is like this bill we are talking about. There's going to be also, after this bill becomes law, the CS in charge of information, ICT, is expected to publish regulations to guide the implementation of this bill. Number 2 benchmark is the issue of cooperation. Cooperation at the global level, international level, and locally through private-public partnership. Then thirdly, there is the issue of capacity building. People have to be educated. Those who are going to enforce this bill have to be educated on matters to do with cybercrime, and also the public is going to be educated on what do and don'ts.
All right.
Then fourthly, we have the issue of organization, general management of cybercrime in the country. This bill has not specified that. That is one area that the committee will be making amendments, so that one way would be to have a body that will regulate matters to do with cybercrime, will handle day-to-day management of issues like responses to cybercrime incidences and such. So there is going to be a lot of improvement that has been discussed following public participation and consideration by the relevant parliamentary committee, which is ICT, and those improvements are going to enhance this bill. But what is important is there is need to handle issues of cybercrime.
Right.
Because we can't live in denial and say because there is freedom of usage of internet and our phones, then we don't need to handle it. We have to handle it because it's a global concern. I have just returned from Geneva, the ITU, International Telecommunication Union. And one of the things the global community is considering is to come up with an international convention on matters of cybercrime. Countries are also being pushed to ensure that they have relevant legislation on matters to do with cybercrime.
All right.
So it is critical. The other very important issue which Kenyans must know is that one of the things that this bill proposes is how to manage what we call the critical infrastructure information system. These are those key systems which, if interfered with, will either lead to huge financial loss, physical harm, or something detrimental to the economy. And for example, we have systems like KRA system, we have systems like the banking industry system, and many other systems. So there's going to be a regulatory framework within the bill on how these systems will be designated and how they will be controlled. So that is very critical to the whole idea of managing cybercrime as well.
Let's hear from Joy just one, but you had something to say on the same.
Yes, I guess my concern is the evidentiary procedures and the procedures of actually effecting the law. Those are some of the questions that, I mean, being in the space that we ask about, because it's great that there's a lot of robust conversation going on about what we want to put in the bill, what we want to prosecute. It's very good that we're deciding how do we cooperate. But the biggest question that we have is how do we actually implement it? Because I think one of the challenges that we've seen over and over again in Kenya is that particular issue of we legislate, we have beautiful legislation in place, but in terms of implementing it. And the other thing as well is also look at some of the major players, because sometimes when we look at the conversations that are being had sometimes on the floor, they're, as we've earlier discussed, slightly myopic and looking at small elements of, you know, a little bit of cyberbullying here and there and extortion. But when talking about the grander scheme of things, how do we protect, for example, and how do we enforce a protection of data that and revenue that we have on our, like on KRA and all of that? How do we protect that money? How do we actually prosecute these people? Do we have the evidentiary procedures where we can actually be able to collect this data and take it, verify and say this is a forensic study of what is happening in the cyberspace in Kenya? So those are the things that we look at, that we say, okay, how can we be able to implement this? Because the law is beautiful and it's very robust, but the implementation processes, that's what I'd be very keen to hear.
All right, Ahmed, unfortunately we're out of time. Very briefly, please.
No, I agree with Joy, but I would like to the members of parliament to spend a lot of time on internet content, especially within the children, and how to prevent some explicit contents coming out and targeting those who are sending those contents.
And accountability, of course, is what is expected to come out of this bill, the Computer and Cybercrimes Bill 2017. Honorable Osotsi will be sitting on that committee, so we'll be waiting for what amendments will be coming